For my homily, I'm passing on to you an idea I heard from a homily for this weekend from Bishop Robert Barron. He's the bishop of the Winona Rochester Diocese in Minnesota. And with him being a bishop out there in Minnesota, I think it's a funny coincidence that just in time for my homily, someone I know got the ball rolling for what you might call a God-incidence that connects Minnesota with us here in Oregon in 5 degrees of separation, with me being in one of those degrees, okay? So I'll wrap up my homily with that story as an immediate example of the encouragement I got from Bishop Barron's message. What he focused on is that his first reading from the prophet Zechariah. It's chapter 9, verses 9 through 10, and particularly the image of this saving king, this king of justice and peace, coming into Jerusalem riding a donkey and showing the meekness and the peaceableness of this king that I hope it rings a bell for all of us, that as Christians we see Jesus fulfilling this prophecy and this image in what we call Palm Sunday, his triumphal entry into Jerusalem on a donkey. Recalling that Jesus, the Gospels tell us, arranged to have that beast of burden for him to ride into Jerusalem, it's pretty reasonable to see, and this is what Bishop Barron says among many people over the centuries, that Jesus was certainly, that he would have been very familiar with this passage from Zechariah, and that he was very deliberately and consciously patterning himself to show the fulfillment of this prophecy. So in the best sense of the word, it was a very calculated decision to say, I want to show that I am this king. I am this Messiah. I am this person of God who's come to bring peace and freedom to God's people. And he's setting himself up for all these people who would recognize the image. And so thinking about Jesus doing this consciously, deliberately, the encouragement that I get from this is a reminder that Jesus knows what he's doing. That's a reason to trust him. That's a reason to abandon and surrender your life to him. That's a reason for those who labor and feel burdened to yoke ourselves to him, and that farming image of being under a yoke, we might say, to cling to Jesus, to hold fast and attach yourself as closely as you can to Jesus because he knows what he's doing. So yes, this image of riding in on a donkey lines up with Zechariah's image of the meekness of this king, which Jesus himself refers to in our gospel passage from Matthew 11, where he says one reason to follow him is that he's meek and humble of heart. But keeping in mind this idea that he knew what he was doing and was very conscious and deliberate in choosing to enter Jerusalem on a donkey, I want to say it also shows that he is wise and clever. So he is our meek and humble, but wise and clever king who knows what he's doing. I know I need to hear that and remind myself of that when things happen that are discouraging or frustrating, when I seem to be failing and things around just seem to be falling apart, that Jesus wants us to put our lives in his hands. And that we all, I suggest, need the Holy Spirit to help us trust Jesus more. I know I do, and I ask the Holy Spirit to help me trust Jesus and trust him more, and maybe you do also. And that brings me to the story I want to tell you of God doing the kind of things to remind me that I can trust him and that he knows what he's doing. And it's occurred just over the past few days. So it started late last week with a man named Todd Cooper, who happens to live right across the street, literally, from the church. And Todd used to work for the Archdiocese of Portland, and now he and his wife are in ministry together in the church as lay people. And this ball that Todd got started rolling calls to mind to me the claim, I'm sure many of us heard, that any individual in the world, you're only 6 degrees of separation from somebody else. Anywhere in the world, people claim you can get from you to almost anybody in the world with just 6 steps. Well, God only needed 5. So I'm going to tell you about these 5 degrees of separation. And this is a ridiculously complicated. So I hope you can follow me, but I feel like the complexity itself is one source of the delight of seeing God weave these strands together to work all things to the good. So we're starting with Todd. Todd reached out to me toward the end of last week. He's actually out of town, even though he's from here, but he's out of town himself. And we've known each other pretty much at least most of my 30 years of being here in Portland. He and I have known each other. And he said he knows a couple from Portland, a married couple, who recently became Catholic. And they had gone out sometime last week and through this weekend out to Minnesota to visit their daughter and son-in-law in Minneapolis. And now the daughter is not Catholic, but they, having just become Catholic and full of all the enthusiasm of that, they said, the Catholics, we have this thing, it's called blessing your house. How would you like to have a Catholic house blessing? And the daughter and son-in-law said, sure, that'd be great. But given their circumstance, they don't know any Catholic priests or clergy in Minneapolis, but they know Todd, so they called Todd and said, Todd, could you help us get a Catholic house blessing in Minneapolis this weekend? Todd knows one priest in the St. Paul, Minneapolis Archdiocese, and he couldn't reach that priest. But he knows me, and he knows that the community I belong to, most parishioners know this, but visitors, I'll explain. I'm a member of a community, an ecumenical community, so non-denominational and mainline Protestants and Catholics. We have as much unity as we can muster, and it's called the People of Praise community. It's primarily lay people and married couples and singles planning to get married, and others, widows and widowers and the like. But anyway, Todd knows that I'm in the People of Praise, and that the People of Praise has a branch based in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So Todd first texted and called me, and he explained the situation. I know some people whose daughter and son-in-law are open to having a house blessing, but they don't know any Catholics out there. So, do you know any Catholic priests in Minnesota, in Minneapolis area? Well, as it turns out, I don't. But in the People of Praise, among the Catholic men in that branch, some are deacons. So I called one of them. So keep in mind, this is Friday afternoon of a holiday weekend. I'm in Portland calling somebody in Minnesota and saying, hi, Jim, that's his name. By this time, it's like going on 7 o'clock in Minneapolis, Friday evening. And I say, I got a crazy story. What are you doing? He says, well, me and my wife, we're going to a concert right now. And I said, well, give me 5 minutes. And I explain this. I know somebody who knows somebody whose daughter or son-in-law want to have a house blessing this weekend in Minneapolis. I don't know them, never met them. I'm looking for somebody to bless their house. Would you do it? People you don't know. Immediately, he said, yeah, that'd be great. I'm happy to bless their house. So I gave my friend Jim, I gave him the phone number. He called those people, and I got a text from him yesterday saying, me and my wife, we're on it. We're going to go to their house and give them a house blessing. So from this, just happened to say it this way because of the circumstances, non-Catholic young woman and her husband being open to her parents' suggestion they have a house blessing by a Catholic, their dad, her dad knowing Todd, Todd knowing me knowing a deacon in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And God wove it all together so that they could have the blessing of a house blessing. Just a reminder to me that Jesus knows what he's doing and can arrange all kinds of things. So just like Jesus arranged this donkey ride into Jerusalem to fulfill the prophecy of Zechariah as the meek and humble king, so he can guide and arrange and lead our lives as the wise and clever king, and encouraging us to attach ourselves to him, to cling to him, to be yoked to him. I invite us all to keep on following Jesus, or to start really following him if you've never really done that. Cling to him more closely and ask him to help us grow in our belief and our trust that he knows what he's doing.